On TV Concierge, the Ringer staff delivers a guide to the vast streaming landscape by discussing one show or movie per day, including premieres, the latest surprise Netflix hits, periodic check-ins on favorite TV shows, new movies available for streaming, and the host's favorite shows to watch right away. Check out TV Concierge exclusively on Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. All right, it's official. I think I've discovered the ultimate coupling of all time. Like any good relationship, they really balance each other out. One is super sweet, and the other, well, they can be a little nutty sometimes. It is, of course, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, the perfect combination of peanut butter and chocolate. So perfect, some would call it true love. Find Reese's now at a store near you. This episode is brought to you by Visible. Maybe you've already let your New Year's resolution slip. We all have, but you can still make a 2 year's resolution with Visible. Right now, you can get a one-line wireless plan from Visible for just $20 per month for 24 months. 24 months is basically 4 Bachelor seasons. That could be 4 engagements, 4 broken engagements. So many other couples we didn't see coming. It's really an eternity in Bachelor Nation. And that's unlimited 5G data powered by Verizon with no annual contracts. Switch now at Visible.com and use the code VISIBLE24. Don't miss out. Offer ends January 31st. New members only. Promotional rate with service on the Visible plan. For additional terms and network management practices, see Visible.com. Welcome to Bachelor Party. I'm Juliet Litman. It's Thursday. It's the day after Colton Underwood went on Good Morning America to announce that he is gay. And to discuss Colton and some other reality stuff, I am joined by the host of Shut Up Evan, Evan Ross Katz. Welcome, Evan. Great to have you.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here in a post-coming-out Colton Underwood world.
It's funny. There's a lot to discuss. I say there's actually not that much that's funny, but I said that because I feel like I actually do want to talk about kind of like his coming out moment and story. And it's actually kind of helpful that it's been about a day because some more details have come out so we can kind of parse some of those. But Evan, you don't watch The Bachelor, I've been told.
I've never seen The Bachelor.
Were you aware of Colton? Like, did you know who he was?
Never heard of him. I have one Bachelor person in my life who's in my run club.
Oh.
He was a recent contestant on the show, and he was dating Gigi Hadid.
Tyler?
So Tyler Cameron. Yeah, sorry, I needed the prompt. Yeah. So Tyler was in my Nike run club.
Oh my God.
And that is as
you
far
just
as
stepped into it because I fucking love Tyler. And I'm friends with Tyler as well.
Oh, great. Well, this guy showed up one morning in the run club and it was probably 65 degrees outside. We got to the pier and he removed his shirt. And I just was like, this person has to be somebody. This body is not that of a normal human.
That's so funny. That is so funny. I get a lot of crap because I'm obsessed with him, but I also am friends with him. But he is a great guy. Can you please confirm?
He's a great guy. Yeah, no, totally can confirm. Literally the kind of guy where because it's a run club, so it's all about encouraging one another. And he was the kind of guy that when you would finish your lap would have his arm up to give you the high five. And which I feel like that tells you a lot about a person's character. So
I agree. He has no business being as nice as he is, given how handsome he is.
Yes.
And moreover, he's the kind of person who I think believes the affirmations that come along with working out. I feel like if he was a SoulCycle instructor and he was saying you got this, he really would mean it. That's who he is.
God love him for that.
That's so funny. So did you know Matt? Matt must have come to the run club. Matt James, Tyler's roommate, now the former Bachelor.
No, I don't. Oh God, no way. I know that person because I've read about them on the internet. No, I would know if he was there. No. This was several times. So I would say those are the ones I know. And then maybe a few others I've heard of. And then I dip my toe in Bachelor news when it's sort of permeates over the ether. Yeah. But I would say I'm Housewives Survivor. And I feel like that's sort of the camp that I'm in and Bachelor is sort of in a different, we're different planets orbiting the same something.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I like all that stuff too. I love Survivor. Survivor's the best. Bachelor, high key problematic. Survivor, very low-key problematic. But
completely agree. I think about this quite often. I feel like Survivor gives us a lot by way of representation from the outset, and deals with its shortcomings in real time. Like actually has conversations about the ways in which people are good and bad. It's not so binary.
Yeah. So many like terrible truths about human nature play out on the show. Anyway, we can come back to that at the end. Let's talk about Colton. So, Evan, what was your reaction to this guy, Colton, who you didn't know of, but maybe like seen his face once or twice, appearing on GMA to announce that he was gay?
Well, I have to say, like, so yeah, I had never heard of him, had no idea who he was. Although I did see that Billy Eichner clip that went around that he had appeared on, and then I was like, oh, I recognize that guy from being the Bachelor contestant that was on that Billy Eichner segment.
I love Billy Eichner like more than most people. Like
a
that I
soothsayer.
know. He's the best. He went to Northwestern, as did I, and he's from New York City, as am I. So I just feel like a lot of pride in Billy Eichner.
No, I
love
get it,
him.
as you should.
And he's so good in The Lion King. Carry on.
Agreed. I would say that my reaction as a gay man was very different from the reaction that I think Colton and GMA were hoping for from the interview. And I think that sort of speaks to the ways in which this planned coming out and the orchestration of the coming out feels very different for, I think, I can only speak for myself, but I can sort of speak to the reaction I'm seeing, that I think for gay people, this feels very different than for the bigger audience that Colton was coming out to, meaning like, the world at large. I sort of just thought it was bullshit, to be frank. I just felt like with everything going on in the world, and I really mean the everything that is going on, the idea of this conventionally attractive, cisgender, wealthy, white man going and orchestrating a GMA sit down with Robin Roberts and knowing all of the mechanisms that go into that, the idea that he would like give this airtime and make it seem like this was some grand admission, it felt like I was back in like 1982.
It's funny you say that, because my reaction was, did he just watch In and Out starring Kevin Kline and feel like he needed some big I'm gay moment? And I am, a straight woman. So I'm like, I don't know if that's a proper read on the situation. Like, I don't have a coming out story, but I was just sort of like, it bummed me out. I have to say, like, I found all of this really sad. And I think one of the reasons I found it sad is because, like, the only reason Colton has to make this huge announcement is because it feels like he's abiding by these fictitious rules set up by The Bachelor, where it's like, in the Bachelor world, you are straight or you're not. You are in a straight relationship or you're not. And there's not much else that's like acknowledged, at least, within the confines of the actual TV show. But and then that like sort of like led me to thinking about the show. And I was just thinking, like, it's so crazy that there's never been a threesome. Like, how's there never been a threesome on this show? You know what I mean? Like, there's all of these people around. They're in isolation. Like, did none of both ways, like, why have none of the women ever been like these two guys, or like one of the men be like these two women? I mean, whatever it is, or just three guys and three women. Like, I just, there's no,
I'll take it all.
Yeah, exactly. There's no there's literally no fluidity at all. There's no fluids or fluidity. And that's why it kind of bummed me out, because I was just like, there's been so many problems with The Bachelor, but this felt, to your point, the most retrograde and like the least progressive moment in The Bachelor's many unprogressive moments in the last year.
Yeah, and also just like going and looking at sort of his follows on Instagram, which I've now done, and seeing the PR agencies that he follows and kind of understanding the cog that he is in the larger wheel of things. I just feel like he did this coming out, he only gained from it, but he made it seem, and this is what happens sometimes, where he made it seem as though he was making some sort of brave admission that would come at potential cost for him. But as we have seen, there is no cost for him. He will profit from this coming out. And so I just think that when the stakes are so high for so many other people who speak out right now against institutions, or who really actually face real risks in speaking their truth and coming forward with things. And I have to admit, like, some of it to me is how it gets framed by others, because, you know, it's not like he was out there saying, I'm doing this brave thing. However, I just feel like him choosing GMA as the platform to do it and having it be like a sit down interview, I just felt, again, to use your word retrograde, agreed. There was just something about it that felt so highfalutin for something that I want to believe in 2021 is just not a big deal.
Sure. Yeah. And you know what? Like, I do want to say I'm happy for Colton if he has, you know, feels comfortable sharing who he is and living his life in a way that he feels to be honest and truthful. Like, that's wonderful. And I wish him the best. I certainly don't wish him ill. I think your point about the orchestration is just really uncomfortable. Apparently he went to GMA himself to orchestrate this, or like with some enablers. Like, that's the thing that I keep coming back to, is there has to be a team that we're not seeing behind the scenes here who's like, do this, do that. And that is also just like gross. Like, there are other people, not only Colton, there are other people who are going to profit off of this orchestrated event. I have to say, Robin Roberts did not look comfortable. I don't think it seemed like she was enjoying herself. I don't know if you actually watched the interview, but I watched both parts, and, you know, they did the classic morning show thing of splitting it between the first hour and the second hour. She did not seem to be enjoying herself.
No, she seemed rather bored because, I don't know Robin Roberts' Bachelor knowledge, but this seemed like the kind of interview that's a little beneath her, considering the gravitas that is Robin Roberts. And I also just feel like if he had come on there with some sort of atypical coming out, the only area of interest is the fact that he's from The Bachelor. Like, that's the hook. But it's not as though he's from The Bachelor and he had this really unique circumstance. I have to say, there's something, and this, again, I'm speaking from my own experience only, but when I see someone like him come forward and talk about the fact that he might have had thoughts of not wanting to wake up the next day, or, you know, just feelings about not wanting to be alive, I have to say that is very common for queer people. It's common for a lot of people who feel othered in this world. And so I want to be respectful of the fact that, like, yes, it is certainly, I'm happy for him, as you said. I concur. But there's something about his use of words and the sort of sympathy I felt like he was trying to gain that was a little too commonplace. And again, going back to this idea of him being this cis, white, wealthy male in this world, he benefits from his whiteness. He benefits from the patriarchy. I just have a hard time. No doubt he had those difficulties, but to go on television, to sit across from a Black woman and talk about the injustices that he has faced, or this idea that he feels somehow oppressed, something about it just felt a little cringy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I again, a lot of this comes back for me to the rigidity of the show and like the worldview of the show, because I'm really into The Challenge. I don't know if you've ever watched that show, but I love it. And this morning I watched both last night's Double Agents episode and today's Challenge All-Stars episode on Paramount Plus, which I just keep plugging over and over because I want other people to watch it because I'm enjoying it so much. And it occurred to me that, like, those shows are have their own set of problems, but they're so much more progressive than The Bachelor. And it's kind of like, maybe it shouldn't be shocking. They've been around for a long time. The genesis of The Real World, which was obviously like a groundbreaking show. But right now on Double Agents, the final 4 women are all women of color. And one of them identifies as queer. And it's like pretty cool. And they are also like talking about it on the show, and they're proud, and it's different, right? And like, it's just, it's crazy. Like, that's an anomaly among reality television. And it's just like, it also indicates to me that, like, the challenge can evolve in the way that The Bachelor can't, because it so strictly adheres to such conventional ideas about relationships.
Yeah. I mean, and also masculinity, right? Because I think something else that a lot of gay people are picking up in is this, it's either an effort or a need or a combination of both, but from Colton to have to exist in this maybe that is who he is, but there's just something about it that read to me is that he is performing masculinity in a way to make his lived experience easier for him. And that might be that he feels he has to. And that, to me, that's sad, right? That is sad that is the world that we live in, or that he lives within. But I just couldn't help watch the interview just being like, you don't have it that bad. And maybe I'm very ignorant for feeling that way. But again, as you stated up top, it's been 24 hours, and that's my initial reaction.
Yeah.
I just was a little, I'm going to be honest, I was a little disgusted.
I also just was like, why is ABC participating in this? I'm just like, I guess it's because The Bachelor is so valuable and because it wasn't a story available to them.
Well, but then this goes back to something I was saying earlier, which is like, I think that they thought this was going to be a water cooler moment in a good way. I thought that they were going to view this as like a sign of progress, right? That we have like the first out gay male bachelor. I think that they saw this as a net positive without realizing that the reaction would be much more nuanced.
Yeah. Yeah. And so some background that you might not have. You probably read about this, but so he left the show. So Colton's season of The Bachelor was a wild ride for a lot of reasons. But the finale, Colton like walks off production, which is like unheard of. And he's a great athlete. So in a very dramatic moment, he jumps over this fence, which is sort of like, it was kind of like Truman on the Truman Show, like leaving,
Love.
And so which is awesome. Yeah. And so that was like really dramatic. And so Colton has become sort of like, I feel like the term icon has like generally positive connotations, but he's just become sort of like a staple of the latter days of The Bachelor as a result. And he walks off because the woman he is into is not into him, tries to break up with him. And then he ultimately gets her back. Her name is Cassie. They end the show dating, or like maybe engaged, but it's like not really. They live together in Huntington Beach. It seems like things are going okay. It seems like, even though it seemed like Cassie's father didn't like Colton on the show. He's close with the family. Colton's one of the first people to have COVID very publicly. He has a really bad bout of COVID about 13 months ago. The story is about how Cassie's family's taking care of him. And then shortly thereafter, they break up. And then all this other stuff comes out. Cassie gets a restraining order against Colton because he's put a tracking device on her car. There's like indication that he would like stand outside of her window and like keep track of her coming and going. So that's sort of like the definition of harassment, I think. And so and then they settled out of court. All of this story also just sort of carries the weight of like, are we just supposed to forget about that? Did Colton orchestrate this to forget about that, to move on from it? I mean, he definitely acknowledged it and he apologizes. I read this morning, Cassie was not given the heads up about this. And I will just say, if you really care about someone who you were in a long public relationship with, I would think you'd give them a heads up. So I think that's like really hard for her. And I bet this is a tough time. She's been through a lot of attention that she may or may not have wanted already. But it just sort of complicates it. And I do, like, you're right. I feel like this was set up to be like a big, like, happy moment, but there's a lot of other complications that, like, I think it's okay to acknowledge.
Right. It sounds like this could have been image rehabilitation. And I do want to mention one thing, because I had read about what you were talking about. So I read also that the restraining order that Cassie had, she had revoked the restraining order. And I just want to point out the fact that just because a person takes back a restraining order does not mean that they do not feel the need to have had the restraining order in the first place.
Yeah.
So I've seen people defending Colton from the angle of, well, the restraining order is no longer out. I'm like, until she gives me the all clear on how to feel about this, I'm under the impression that something went amiss that's going to not make me feel great about the circumstance that he put her in. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think that is something. Now, I will say, for a lot of the people that I have seen reacting to the news, I saw it shift throughout the day. So I remember like 9 a.m., it was gay Twitter being like, welcome to the family. And then by like noon, it was like beginning to bring up like the news that you mentioned, sort of like his sordid past from, the past year. And then more and more started to develop. And then like by nightfall, LOL, by nightfall, I feel like it had completely turned, and it was just like, we don't want this person. We don't claim this person. And I think that tells you a lot about the velocity of popular culture today, but also it tells you a lot about sort of like, I think, again, Colton and team, shall we say, I feel like they were hoping for the 9 a.m. reaction, and they were hoping that the 9 a.m. reaction would be the reaction, not realizing that this past that you mentioned was going to come up, but also that like queer people might be a bit more discerning about how a coming out is done in 2021 and who the benefits that come from that when you are someone like Colton.
Right. Yeah. And I think, right after I had heard about this, I think it must have been on a press release or some internal like media something, because I get like screeners and press releases from Netflix, of which I'm like obsessed with, and at points in the pandemic I'm just, the high of having early access to Bridgerton was extreme
Important.
And so I had heard that Colton was doing a miniseries with Netflix. I think it had like just appeared like in the last week or so, like news of that swirling, but like when that came out yesterday I was like, yeah, I heard about that. And apparently there's a petition on change.org to like not do the miniseries because people like just don't want to move forward with that. And then there was a pretty good article on the Daily Beast about like what we're talking about, which is like there's like, Colton, him coming out is great and living a happy, honest life. I mean, of course, honesty is fluid for all people, but whatever that means for him, that's wonderful. But that doesn't like mean that all this other stuff goes away. And there is this really good piece by this writer, Laura Bradley, and I definitely suggest checking it out. She kind of like digs into this conflict of like someone with a past, but also wanting to celebrate them and their path forward. And I was about to say their new path forward, but like I actually don't even know if it is a new path. Like I don't know how Colton's been living for the last few years, and he has said that he first realized he was gay when he was 6, and then by the time he got to high school, he could like really like name it to himself, but was raised in the Catholic Church and had so much negative reinforcement that it brought a lot of self hatred. And I think that's people have those kinds of stories. They seem fairly common, not only with recognizing your sexuality, but like other ways people have like engaged in self-loathing. So you got to feel for him in that way, of course.
Of course. I think another thing that I think is worth bringing up is examining who Colton follows on Instagram. And I think 2 of his followers were pointed out yesterday. One being Dan Crenshaw, the politician and former U.S. Navy SEAL, and then also Candace Owens, the far-right provocateur. I think these were signals to a lot of people that Colton is, I don't know. I don't know until he says it, but I'm just telling you that those, as a gay person, when I see another gay person that follows Dan Crenshaw and Candace Owens, it has me raising my eyebrow quite a bit. And so I'm just, again, I'm curious, sort of, I'm hesitant to get behind him in any way because I'm just a little sus about who he's going to affiliate himself with. I do want to point out, though, that there is a world in which Colton uses this platform to amplify other voices within the community, particularly those that are sort of deal with issues that fall under religion, right? In which they feel like they grapple with their sexuality because of their religious beliefs and because of the Catholic Church's complex relationship with homosexuality. So I do think there's a world in which he can pass the mic and something quote unquote good can come from this. But that remains to be seen.
He was talking about being able to go back to church and pray and like feel like that was like a fulfilling, which I think is awesome. I've said this with other podcasts. I really admire people who have that connection to religion in a way that's like positive for them. I think it's like almost like a willful act to like establish that connection. So I admire that. And I hope that's true. Some other stuff that kind of just like kind of caught my eye on this was also, he said that like one of the next steps was like letting people know. And that's like one of the reasons he was doing this GMA thing. And it just like also really bums me out to like have to live this for the reaction. It's just sort of like you have to just live it. And like that's that. I don't know. I just want to be like Colton. It's time to exit fame. That's my bottom line. It's like, this is great. And just go do it, man.
Right. Well, I think this kind of highlights the idea of like living your truth and fame and capitalism and ego and all the things that are wrapped up in fame. They're kind of antithetical concepts in a way.
Yeah.
And so as as great as it is that it's like, oh yes, there's another out gay person in the media for young people to look at it, and perhaps this normalizes the existence of gay people in the church, blah, blah, blah. Perhaps. And I want to give space for that. There's also just that idea, like at the end of the day, GMA and now Colton and The Bachelor, all of these are corporations, right? And that stand for gaining capital at the end of the day. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult watching him. Clearly, he is going to pursue, he has a level of fame. It's clear he wants to pursue to sustain that fame or pursue a greater amount of fame. And with that comes ego and all of the things that sort of, can muddy one's own life. So I guess it's just curious sort of seeing this idea of like a coming out as a business move is strange.
Yeah. I also, there was this idea also like that he needs to does he apologize, or like, should he apologize to the women of his season of The Bachelor? And I'm just like, absolutely not. Like, I think that's, first of all, it implies there was like some kind of deception. And like, while like, I don't think this is an absent of criticism of Colton, I don't think that's a fair one. I'm just like, that's like another part of this like really rigid thinking of like the Bachelor is like, Colton knew and he should have told these women. And it's just like, it's like so ridiculous. Like, who knows what was going through his mind at the time? And what about the women? They didn't all go on because they love Colton. Like, that's like so ridiculous. When he was like, I apologize to them for dragging them into this mess. Apologize to Cassie personally and like own up to it if you want to. But like for the whole gang of women, I mean, like, come on, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a nuanced topic, but I think that they have the right to be however they feel about it. They have the right to feel bamboozled or whatever. And especially given the circumstance that there were cameras on them, that they thought that they were entering into one circumstance and it was not the circumstance that they thought. But yeah, I mean, yes, I definitely agree with you in terms of I don't think that's something of the many things we can criticize Colton for on this lovely Thursday morning. I don't think that is one of the things to go after. But it was interesting watching, and this is one of those things where it's like, again, I'm learning about Bachelor Nation. Is that I don't know if you saw Carol Radziwill from The Real Housewives of New York.
I love Radzi. I missed this though.
Radzi got into quite a bit of hot water yesterday, kind of speaking to this point of saying that she felt bad for these women because they were, bamboozled in a sense. And I don't like that framework being sort of brought out by anyone besides the women. If the women feel that way, that's their lived experience. For others to say that, it sort of perpetuates this idea that gay men who are not out of the closet are not publicly out, I should say, rather, are somehow hiding something or have some sort of secret that they are keeping. It's just every person's journey is their own journey. We don't even know at this time if, for all intents and purposes, Colton might have identified as heterosexual during The Bachelor. I mean, there's more story here, but I think the assumptive nature that Colton went on to this show as a gay man with the intention of seeking fame at the cost of these women's emotions, that to me feels like that's someone. That's not facts, right?
Yeah.
That might come out and be the case, but that's not the facts as we know them today. So I think people have to give, in this instance, Colton the benefit of the doubt and say that like sexuality, obviously we know is a spectrum, but sexuality is also a journey, right? And so like for some people like myself, it's like knew I was gay early on, was never up for question. But for Colton, and there are people that, look at someone like Caitlyn Jenner who came out as trans, in her 70s, 60s, 70s. And it's like, that's her journey. It's not for anyone else to say, oh, well, you should have done this, blah, blah, blah. So I understand that those, again, 24 hours, it's been 24 hours. So again, those former contestants might be feeling a certain way and they have every right to, but some of this armchair sort of commentary about how Colton did these women wrong, I don't love that.
Me neither. I also just don't want to assign blame to anyone. I mean, I guess I'm assigning it to the show, but that's sort of more of my own journey where I'm just like, which is like, to be so engaged in something so rigid and retrograde is just sort of like, it's hard. It's just sort of like, what is like, am I enabling that as much as Colton's enablers are enabling his path right now? It's something to think about it all the time. These Real Housewives, they got to get off Twitter. Almost none of them have ever benefited from tweeting. And also it shows you how gracious these Real Housewives editors are.
Yeah, I feel like I miss the days of the blogs that they used to do on Real Housewives.
Oh, I loved those, yeah.
Because
on Bravo.
it gave them freedom of space. And the thing about tweeting is, as you know, it's like 280 characters. And I feel like housewives are not known for being pithy. And so I think some of the challenge sometimes is them trying to have like a non-fully formed thought that has to then that unformed thought is then condensed, which is only going to make it more muddled. And so, yeah, I think quite often I just I wish they would log off. But the Carol thing yesterday was interesting in her, like she just kept doubling down on this. And it was really one of those things where it's like, once you shoot off a tweet in 2021, famous or not famous, once you shoot off a tweet and it starts to go viral for the wrong reasons, delete it. That's just my mindset. And my mindset's just delete it. You're angering people,
I think you have to be like, deleted my tweet because. You have to acknowledge you deleted it.
Agreed.
You can't just like delete it. There's internet archive and the screenshots live on.
Yeah, but what was odd was just this idea of like, no, I'm going to respond to all the people explaining to me, and level-headed explanations, might I add, explaining to me sort of like why my view was a bit myopic. And instead it was just sort of like, no, you're wrong. And also, I just don't love the idea of telling her or anyone telling other gay people that their reaction to this news is wrong. Because like I said, and this is the same thing about those ladies that were on the show, everyone is entitled to their own reaction to this news from their own lived experience. But we have to have room to understand where everyone is coming from in all of this and why a gay man who's been out their entire life is going to have a different reaction to this than maybe a 12-year-old closeted gay kid in Minnesota who sees this and might be genuinely moved. I want to allow room for that. And I think that's one of the ways in which, if we're talking about positives, that could be a potential positive from all of this.
Yeah, totally. This episode is brought to you by Visible. Maybe you've already let your New Year's resolution slip. We all have, but you can still make a 2 year's resolution with Visible. Right now, you can get a one-line wireless plan from Visible for just $20 per month for 24 months. 24 months is basically 4 Bachelor seasons. That could be 4 engagements, 4 broken engagements, so many other couples we didn't see them coming. It's really an eternity in Bachelor Nation. And that's unlimited 5G data powered by Verizon with no annual contracts. Switch now at Visible.com and use the code Visible24. Don't miss out. Offer ends January 31st. New members only. Promotional rate with service on the Visible plan. For additional terms and network management practices, see Visible.com. This episode is brought to you by eBay Authenticity Guarantee. eBay knows that when it comes to jewelry, authenticity is the real gem. When you see the blue check mark that says Authenticity Guarantee, it means your next piece will be carefully inspired by jewelry experts and will always be worth its weight in gold. Whether you're looking to make a statement or build the perfect everyday look, eBay is making sure you get the real deal. With eBay Authenticity Guarantee, you can trust that jaw-dropping piece will always arrive jaw-droppingly real. Ensure your next purchase is the real deal. Visit ebay.com for terms.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
I think that I'm just sort of like, I don't find Colton very interesting. And I don't think that being gay makes you more interesting. It just is a part of who you are.
Agreed. So. And I feel like it's like if I'm going to have more gay people in the plethora of out figures in the Hollywood or like the media space, they need to be interesting. Yeah. So like if anything, it's like it's frustrating to me that the LGBTQ plus community have to now claim him, because I'm like, we're dealing with enough of people that we constantly have to claim and sort of defend and sort of say, sure, they're well-meaning. Caitlyn Jenner being a great example of that. And so I just don't think or Ellen, it's like, I don't think we need another figure that we can't unabashedly get behind. It's like, this is not JoJo Siwa. I want more JoJo Siwas.
Sure. And also JoJo Siwa, that was news, but she just got on with it, right?
Got on with it, yes.
I think her generation, honestly, this is
generational. Yep.
It's a new world, and
yes.
I hope that people look more to JoJo Siwa.
But I think it's worth contrasting those coming outs for just a moment to say that there was something about her coming out, and I think obviously it has to do with the fact that, you know, she's much younger and just generally more enthusiastic, but her coming out was so joyful. And I think there's something in the tone of that interview yesterday that just felt very like I'm admitting something that might hurt me to admit or something. It didn't feel like it was coming from a place of like, now I am free. It felt like from a place of like, no, I might still be tied down from the waist down. You just can't see it. So there just was something about it to me that sort of beyond just the PR orchestration of it all. And I'm not saying every coming out needs to be joyful, but I do think that the reason why people reacted to the JoJo Siwa coming out the way they did was just feeling like, oh my God, even whether I know this girl or not, this girl seems really happy in life. And I am happy for a person who is living their truth and happy because of it.
Totally.
That's not what yesterday evoked.
Well, that also reminds me of something else. I'm glad you brought this up. Correct me if I'm wrong. JoJo Siwa used like her own social channels to announce this, right?
Yes.
And so she did it very much on her own terms to the audience she already has, whereas Colton has an audience. I mean, he has an Instagram. Also, I like once signed, do you know what community is? Like that like text message thing.
Yeah.
I once signed up for Colton's community thing. So I have like 2 phone numbers. One I use for like spam. And so I use, and like on my spam phone number account, I like get these like fake Colton community messages. But I'm just saying like he could have done something more similar and honestly more current to the moment of like using his social, a good old Notes app post, a photo with a sunset, where, we have so many ways to do it to make it as an announcement. But he chose GMA, which I think feels cynical, and that kind of adds to the tonal difference.
Right. And I think part of him was like, oh, I'm going to do it with an out woman that I'm sitting across from. Yeah. So he thought that might add some more gravity to it, but it didn't feel like a meeting of the minds in the sense that maybe he, thought it might be. Let me ask you this. So again, I'm very unfamiliar with this person until yesterday. The Instagram has no content on it. Was that wiped in anticipation of the coming out?
Interesting. I'm going to look right now.
Because I have to imagine the Instagram, which has nearly 2 million followers, had to at one point have content.
It did. It also, it was like this classic Bachelor, a lot of workout stuff, he used to have a lot of posts. Workout, Cassie, this, that. I mean, I don't know when he wiped it. But that's because I have never found him particularly interesting. I have just found just like not following, I'm not following him, so I don't know.
But it's that weird thing that people like this, like that have the personality type that he does do, which is that sort of like, I don't want attention. I'm waving my Instagram. I don't want you to know anything about me, but I'm going to go on GMA and come out. It's like one of those things where it's like, look at me, but don't look at me. There's a famous, not famous, but there's a line from The Real Housewives that the legend Eileen Davidson said in one of her early seasons. Nice. It's in a confessional and she's making a joke and she's like, the whole thing of like Housewives is look at me, but don't look at me. And like, that's what Colton's doing. And it's like confusing because it's like, he clearly is seeking out attention. We know that there's projects in the works with him. And yet we know that when someone comes out, one of the first things, especially people like me who have never heard of him, are going to do is look them up on social. And all I found was this blank Instagram account. And I just was like, okay, I don't know.
Do you think there's something to wanting to like demarcate a new path forward, maybe?
I hate that though. Like, I mean, yes, but like, yes, I have to give space for that. I want to be kind. But I also just feel like you are all of your life experiences. A new direction might come forward today, but and like, to everyone their own journey. But to me, it's like, why can't he love the person? Like, why can't this be an exciting new chapter versus some new book? Because it's like, you are a person in the public domain. The reason why you were afforded an interview on GMA is because of your past. So the idea that you want to erase your past, you might be able to erase your past on Instagram, but like for your fans or people that know about you, you are nothing but your past as of now. Mm-hmm. So I just find, again, that the messaging is so confusing because it's like, we know and love you. I don't even know if people love him, but they know him from this show called The Bachelor, but he clearly is going to want to disassociate himself from it. And that's going to be tricky, right? Because it's like the majority of your fandom up until now has been people that like you from this show, that you are now going to be called into question about whether you were authentic in who you were on the show. Complicated. I don't know how you move forward if you're him.
I feel like the only celebrity I can think of who's like navigated the kind of like shift that he seems like he wants to make in terms of their audience, not in terms of who they are at all, but like just in terms of the audience, is Lance Bass, where he went from like a really heavily female audience, sort of shallow celebrity, totally idolized, but then became a much fuller person with a full career, who I recently watched on Lisa Vanderpump's Overserved on whatever streaming network that was.
Wow, they got a viewer.
They got one. The show was so bad, by the way.
I saw a clip and that was enough.
It was horrible. It made me sad for Lisa. It's just like, this is what's happening for you. I used to love her. Anyway, I don't know. I just wish Colton the best. I don't want to be a part of Colton's journey any further. I just have never really been that interested in him. So like, I wish him the best, and like, I'm ready to move on to other celebrities.
I think it's really what I'm curious about is because, I'm like really obsessed with this idea of like recycled news stories and sort of like recycled outrage that exists today. And so this really took up this, I thought, was such a big conversation yesterday on Twitter and just in the media in general, that it became one of those topics that you kind of like had to have an opinion about. I mean, even me right now, it's like, I didn't know who Colton Underwood was, 48 hours ago. And now here I am like going long about the topic, and happily so. And so I'm curious sort of like the sustenance that this can provide in terms of, is this a one and done in terms of like, okay, he came out, people felt a certain way about it one way or the other, or a different way, blah, blah, and then we're done? Or is there a continued life? Because you brought up the example of Lance Bass. And with all due respect to Lance Bass, his career, it definitely has like a C-list glean about it in his posts coming out, and I'm curious if like that is going to be a similar space that Colton will occupy, in the sense that like, I think like certain people fuck with Lance Bass and certain people like just pretend a Lance Bass doesn't exist. I think there's a reason Lance Bass is guest starring on a Lisa Vanderpump project that is not going to have a second season. And so I'm curious if like Colton will follow a similar trajectory, or is there a world in which, this is his jumping off point and he becomes, this public speaker, or who knows? So I guess my question is like, I don't know whether or not I care enough to continue watching, or whether or not people will care enough.
The Bachelor fan base is really weird. It's a very strange and divided audience. Like, there's a lot of people, and I think people who work for the show, who are like, good for you, Colton. This is great. Like, really happy for you. There's some murmurs now of like, will there be a gay Bachelor? But I think the majority of the Bachelor fan base does not want that. So I don't know. I don't know what will happen. And I think this is true of most network reality shows. I think like the cable network divide is actually really vast. First of all, audience size. Like, Housewives audiences are so much smaller than you would think, right?
Totally.
But like, just back to where we started, Survivor has like a really I think overrepresented like the amount of contestants who really identify as Christian and like are religious.
Well, yeah, because Mark Burnett and Jeff Probst love that.
Yeah, but it also clearly connects with it. There's an audience for that too.
Completely.
And then did you know that it came out that like Joe is a QAnon guy? And
who's
like,
Joe?
From a few seasons ago, Joe Anglin.
Oh, so I'm only seasons 1 through 28. I just finished 28. Yeah. I'm on my.
I earned it for you. Just don't
you're
fall
fine.
in love.
I'm new to the but like, deep. But yeah. But no, I do want to point out the fact that with regards to the gay Bachelor conversation, I don't want a gay Bachelor for a lot of reasons. One, I think we got one in the form of this television show Prince Charming several years ago on Logo. But also, I think that I think that my sense is that a gay Bachelor would bring out some of the worst qualities in gay men. And this is something I've heard women say about the contestants on The Bachelor, that it sort of shows some of the worst aspects of womanhood. Again,
Definitely.
I don't know this. This is just what I've heard. But Survivor, gay survivor. I think that is what many people are clamoring for, because I think that one thing that a show like Survivor allows for is more nuanced personality in terms of seeing how people react in a myriad of situations, team building challenges, having to, build a shelter, having to gather food. There's just so many sort of like human moments that
Sure.
I think what I'm looking for, first of all, yes, I want more television shows comprised of LGBTQ plus casts, but I'm also looking for, when I do see that, and I love Drag Race, for instance, I think that's a great example, but Drag Race is a group of similar LGBTQ plus people in the sense that they're all pursuing drag. I think a show like Survivor is great in that it allows for diverse representation and and experiences to happen in real time that show you more about a person. So, gay Survivor.
I think also the worst thing about a gay Bachelor season would be that it would necessarily impose someone's conception of like what the relationship should look like and what that like connection should look like.
Yes.
And that I actually think would be damaging and counterproductive.
And like, honestly, it's like, I could see a world in which it's like 3 of the contestants end up like sleeping together one night and then become a throuple. And it's just like, they could get themselves into such shit. And because there are realities of, I was going to say LGBTQ plus existence, but I think specifically in this instance of like gay men, there are aspects of gay male intimacy or relationships that I don't know that the audience for The Bachelor necessarily needs to know about, wants to know about. I'm not sort of keen to like have that be something that goes into the homes of America.
Right. Evan, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I've also learned a lot. So thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you. Tell me this much. So if I were to start, so what I did with my Survivor journey was I started with season 7 at the
Pearl Islands?
At the behest of so many, and then went back and did
Rupert,
season 1 onward. Rupert. But if I were to start a Bachelor journey, having never seen the show, what would be like the primer season?
I prefer The Bachelorette, which might be because it's easier for me to project myself onto the show. But I also just think it's more fun. Because like the women being catty is like annoying. I would recommend, let's see, Jason Mesnick's Bachelor season, Caitlin Bristow's Bachelorette season. What else was real? Those are probably like the 2 best. Hannah Brown with Tyler, your running buddy. That was a good one. Even though I don't love Hannah. I thought she was a good Bachelorette and that was a good season. More old school are hard to find. So like those are I think are all available. So I would do those. Jason, Hannah, and Caitlin. Those are my 3 favorites.
Okay. I think after this conversation, I'm like, you know what? I need to get a little bit literate. So I will dive in and report back.
Thank you so much, Evan. For more of Evan, find him on Shut Up Evan, his podcast, and on Twitter, where you're kind of a Twitter celebrity, although blocked by some celebrities yourself. So check it out. I'll be back next week. We got Bree coming on from the most recent season, so that should be fun. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. And Colton, wishing you the best. Good luck.
Good luck.